What happens when one of country music's most beloved, most respected, and most professional entertainers finally reaches her breaking point on live television? What happens when a woman who has spent decades building a legacy of kindness, talent, and grace is pushed too far by someone who mistakes mockery for comedy? Today, we're diving into the shocking moment that had Reba McEntire storming off Jimmy Fallon's show after a brutal confrontation, leaving millions of viewers stunned and the entertainment world absolutely buzzing. This isn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This is a story about dignity, about respect, and about the moment even the kindest person on earth decides enough is enough. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below because you won't believe how this whole situation unfolded. The studio lights were blazing bright that Tuesday evening as Reba McEntire settled into the familiar guest chair on The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. The legendary country music icon, known for her decades of hits, her acting career, and her unmistakable red hair and warm smile, had agreed to this appearance as part of her media tour for a new album and upcoming tour. Unlike the typical Hollywood press junket, this album was something she had poured her heart and soul into, a deeply personal project that had taken years to create. She'd been looking forward to this appearance, especially since The Tonight Show had a massive audience that might not typically listen to country music. But something felt different today. The energy in the room was tense, and Jimmy Fallon seemed unusually agitated, even before the cameras started rolling. The evening started like any other at The Tonight Show studios. Reba McEntire arrived early, dressed in her characteristic elegant style, a beautiful blazer and jeans, looking every bit the country music royalty that she was. She exchanged pleasantries with the crew, signed a few autographs, and prepared for what she expected to be a standard promotional interview. Jimmy Fallon sat at his desk, shuffling through his notes with visible nervous energy. As the show's theme music faded and the cameras rolled, Jimmy offered the standard warm welcome that viewers had come to expect. But there was already an undercurrent of tension that seemed to emanate specifically from Jimmy's direction. He had that look in his eyes, the one that regular viewers knew meant he was ready to push the boundaries, to make jokes at someone else's expense, to stir the pot. "Reba, thank you so much for being here." Jimmy began with his characteristic enthusiasm. "We're so excited to have you on the show." Reba McEntire nodded politely, offering that signature warm smile that had captivated audiences for decades. "Thank you for having me, Jimmy. It's always a pleasure to be here," she said in that distinctive Oklahoma drawl that fans had come to adore. But before Jimmy could continue with his planned questions, there was a noticeable shift in the atmosphere. The band members exchanged glances, sensing that something was different about this interview. Jimmy leaned forward, his posture becoming more aggressive, more confrontational. "You know, Reba, I have to ask, and I know our viewers are curious about this too. You've been in this business for what, 40 years now? That's a long time. Don't you ever get tired of singing the same old songs? I mean, how many times can you sing about heartbreak and trucks before it gets old?" The question hung in the air like a lead balloon. The studio fell silent. Reba's smile flickered for just a moment, but she maintained her composure. "Well, Jimmy, I don't think of it that way. Every song tells a different story. Every audience brings a different energy. And every performance is a new opportunity to connect with people." Reba responded, her tone measured but with a slight edge that anyone paying attention would have noticed. Jimmy, however, either didn't pick up on the warning signs or simply chose to ignore them. He leaned back in his chair, that smirk that his critics knew all too well spreading across his face. "Oh, come on, Reba. Be honest. You've been singing the same songs for decades. You've got your greatest hits, your signature ballads, your up-tempo numbers. It's all the same formula. Don't you ever want to try something different? Something that might actually challenge you as an artist?" Reba's eyes narrowed slightly. "I've actually released over 30 studio albums, Jimmy. I've explored country, gospel, pop, and even Broadway. I think I've challenged myself plenty over the years." The band members, sensing the growing tension, tried to redirect the conversation. "Reba, let's talk about your new album. The fans are really loving it and the reviews are incredible." But Jimmy wasn't finished. In fact, he was just getting started. And what came next would prove to be the catalyst for everything that followed. You know what I find interesting, Reba? Here you are, this incredibly successful country music star, but you seem to have such a problem with being honest about your career. I mean, you've made millions from these big tours and album sales, and yet you act like you're just some regular woman from Oklahoma. It's a little disingenuous, don't you think? The accusation was delivered with Jimmy's typical joking tone, but this time he had clearly crossed a line. Reba's eyes flashed with something that went beyond mere annoyance. This was personal now. I think you have a fundamental misunderstanding of who I am and why I do what I do, Reba replied, her voice dropping to that dangerous quiet tone that anyone who knew her would recognize as a warning. I've never claimed to be anything other than who I am. I'm a country singer from Oklahoma who got lucky enough to make a living doing what I love. I don't see anything disingenuous about that. Jimmy laughed. Actually laughed in a way that came across as dismissive and condescending. Oh, please, Reba. Luck. You didn't get lucky. You worked hard, sure. But you also had the right look, the right sound, the right timing. And let's be honest, you've been coasting on that success for years now. The insult hit its mark. For a woman who had spent decades honing her craft, working with some of the greatest musicians in country music history, and taking on roles that challenged her both as a singer and as an actress, to have her life's work dismissed so casually was clearly a bridge too far. You know what, Jimmy? Reba said, her voice rising for the first time since the interview began. I came here today to talk about a project I'm passionate about, something I've put months of work into, something that means the world to me. And instead, you want to sit here and take cheap shots at my career and my character. The studio had gone completely quiet. Even the crew members who had been moving around behind the cameras had stopped what they were doing. This was no longer an interview. This was rapidly becoming a confrontation, and everyone in the room could feel it. The band members tried to intervene. Let's just take a step back here. And no, Jimmy, Reba interrupted, something she never would have done under normal circumstances. I think Jimmy has something he wants to get off his chest. So let's hear it. Let's hear what you really think about country music and the artists who dedicated their lives to it. Jimmy, perhaps realizing he had pushed too hard but unwilling to back down in front of millions of viewers, doubled down on his position. Look, I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. You country music types live in these bubbles, making these same old songs about the same old things, and then you act like you're doing something important. Meanwhile, there are real issues in the world that need attention. And you think sitting here every night playing the same old chords and singing the same old lyrics is somehow more important? Reba shot back, her composure finally beginning to crack. At least when I do my job, I'm trying to entertain people, to give them something that might make their lives a little better for a couple of hours. I'm trying to tell stories that matter, that connect with people on a human level. What exactly are you contributing? The attack was direct and pointed, and Jimmy's face flushed red with anger. He had clearly not expected Reba to fight back with such intensity. I'm entertaining people. I'm making people laugh. I'm giving them a break from their troubles. Reba leaned back in her chair and gave Jimmy a look that could have frozen water. Is that what you call this? Entertainment? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks more like you're just trying to tear people down to make yourself feel better. To make yourself feel important because you never got to be the musician, never got to be the artist. So instead, you sit behind this desk and attack people who actually had the courage to pursue their dreams. The words hung in the air like a live grenade with the pin pulled. Jimmy's face went from flushed to pale in seconds, and for perhaps the first time in his career on The Tonight Show, he was momentarily speechless. But Jimmy Fallon was not someone who stayed quiet for long, especially when he felt cornered. Excuse me, Jimmy said, his voice rising to match Reba's intensity. I've been in this business for decades, Reba. I was doing comedy and television when you were still a struggling singer playing small clubs. Don't lecture me about contributing to society. Reba's eyes narrowed dangerously. And I was working, Jimmy. I was building my craft, paying my dues, learning from every experience. And for the record, I never pretended to be anything. I worked because I needed to pay the bills, something you might not understand given your privileged position here. The other guests on the show were now visibly uncomfortable. The band members kept glancing between the two combatants like they were watching a tennis match. The audience looked like they wanted to crawl under their seats. The show's producers, usually the masters of controlling chaos on the show, seemed unsure how to handle this unprecedented situation. Privileged position. Jimmy's voice cracked with indignation. I worked my way up from nothing, Reba. I started in comedy clubs where half the audience wanted to throw things at me. I earned every single thing I have. And what exactly do you have, Jimmy? Reba shot back, her voice dripping with disdain. A platform that you use to ambush guests and make them uncomfortable? A career built on making jokes at other people's expense? That's your legacy? Jimmy slammed his hand on the desk, causing the coffee mugs to rattle. My legacy is making people laugh. My legacy is not kissing up to celebrities like some people do. I ask the questions that need to be asked. Questions? Reba laughed bitterly. Is that what you call what you've been doing here today? Because from my perspective, it looks more like a personal attack wrapped up in the pretense of comedy. The show's producers finally found their voice. Guys, we need to dial this back a little bit. We're on live television here. And no, Jimmy interrupted sharply, never taking his eyes off Reba. If Ms. McEntire here thinks she can come on my show and insult me and my profession, then she's going to hear exactly what I think about her attitude and her arrogance. Your show. Reba's voice rose to a level that made everyone in the studio flinch. Your show. Last time I checked, this was called The Tonight Show, not the Jimmy Fallon Hour. And if you think asking loaded questions designed to make your guests look bad is comedy, then you have a very warped understanding of what real entertainers do. The accusation hit Jimmy like a physical blow. He had always prided himself on his interviewing skills, and to have them questioned so publicly and so harshly was clearly more than he could tolerate. Real entertainers. Jimmy's voice was now shaking with rage. Real entertainers like the ones who follow you around asking about your personal life. Real entertainers like the ones who dig into your relationships and your family. Maybe I should start asking about some of those topics if you want real entertainment. The threat was unmistakable, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Reba McEntire had always been fiercely protective of her privacy and her family, and Jimmy had just crossed the most dangerous line possible. Reba stood up slowly from her chair, her full height making her an imposing figure even in the confines of the studio. The movement was deliberate and controlled, but there was something in her posture that suggested barely contained fury. Are you threatening me, Jimmy? Reba's voice was now dangerously quiet. The kind of quiet that came before an explosion. Are you actually sitting here on live television threatening to invade my family's privacy because I called you out on your unprofessional behavior? Jimmy seemed to realize he had gone too far. But his pride wouldn't let him back down. I'm just saying that if you want to play hardball, Reba, I know how to play hardball too. This isn't some concert stage where you can storm off whenever you don't like the script. You're absolutely right, Reba said, her voice getting louder with each word. This isn't a concert stage. On a concert stage, people have respect for each other. On a concert stage, people do their jobs professionally. On a concert stage, when someone is clearly out of line, the producer steps in and fixes the problem. She turned to look directly at the camera, addressing the audience at home. Ladies and gentlemen, I came here today to talk about an album that I'm proud of. An album that took months of hard work from hundreds of talented people. Instead, I've been subjected to what can only be described as a character assassination by someone who apparently thinks that bullying guests makes for good television. The studio was now in complete chaos. Producers were frantically trying to figure out whether to cut to commercial. The band members were whispering urgently among themselves, and the crew was frozen in place, unsure whether to keep filming or not. Jimmy, realizing that Reba had effectively turned the entire situation against him, made one last desperate attempt to regain control. Oh, so now I'm the bully. You're the one who's been sitting there insulting me and my work for the last 10 minutes. You're the one who's been acting like you're too good to be here. Reba turned back to face Jimmy directly, and the look in her eyes was something that would be talked about for years afterward. I never said I was too good to be here, Jimmy. What I said was that I expected to be treated with basic human decency. Apparently, that was too much to ask. Basic human decency? Jimmy's voice cracked as he practically screamed the words. You want to talk about decency? You've been condescending and rude from the moment you sat down. You've acted like answering questions was beneath you. I answered every legitimate question that was asked, Reba replied, her voice now eerily calm in contrast to Jimmy's hysteria. What I didn't do was sit here and let you use me as a punching bag for whatever personal issues you're dealing with. The accusation that Jimmy was taking out personal frustrations on her was the final straw. Jimmy's face contorted with rage as he prepared to unleash what would prove to be the most damaging response of his career. Jimmy leaned forward in his chair, his eyes blazing with an anger that seemed to consume all rational thought. Personal issues. Personal issues. You want to know what my personal issue is, Reba? My personal issue is entitled celebrities who think they can waltz in here, act like they're doing us some kind of favor, and then get offended when someone doesn't kiss their ring. Reba's face hardened into an expression that could have been carved from stone. And there it is. The real Jimmy Fallon. Not the comedian, not the entertainer. Just someone who resents successful people and uses his platform to tear them down out of pure spite. Spite. Jimmy's voice reached a pitch that made everyone in the studio wince. You think this is about spite? This is about accountability, Reba. This is about not letting people like you hide behind your fame and act like you're above criticism. Criticism? Reba's laugh was harsh and bitter. Is that what you call this circus? Because real criticism involves actual knowledge of the subject. Real criticism comes from a place of wanting to understand, not from a place of wanting to destroy. Jimmy stood up abruptly, matching Reba's earlier move, but where his had been controlled and deliberate, his was erratic and desperate. Destroy? You think I'm trying to destroy you? Reba, you're destroying yourself right here on live television. Every word out of your mouth is proving exactly what I've been saying about your attitude. My attitude? Reba's voice exploded with a fury that had been building for the entire interview. My attitude? Jimmy. I have spent 40 years in this business working with some of the most talented and dedicated people on the planet. I have worked with musicians who demanded excellence, with producers who pushed themselves to their limits, with crew members who gave everything they had to make something beautiful. And in all those years, through all those productions, I have never, and I mean never, encountered the level of unprofessional, vindictive behavior that you have displayed here today. The words hit Jimmy like a series of physical blows. His face went white, then red, then white again as the full weight of Reba's condemnation sank in. But instead of backing down, he doubled down with a viciousness that shocked even his regular viewers. Unprofessional, vindictive? Jimmy's voice was now shaking with rage. You know what's unprofessional, Reba? Coming on a show and acting like you're too good to engage with the hosts. You know what's vindictive? Sitting there with that smug expression, acting like everyone else is beneath you. Reba took a step closer to Jimmy's position at the desk, her presence now dominating the entire set. I have been nothing but respectful to every other person on this stage. I have answered questions. I have tried to stay focused on why I'm here. And I have maintained my composure even while being repeatedly attacked. If you see that as smugness, then that says a lot more about you than it does about me. The producers made one final desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Okay, everybody needs to just take a breath here. We're going to take a commercial break. And no, Reba said firmly, never taking her eyes off Jimmy. I think the audience deserves to see this through to its conclusion. They deserve to see what happens when someone with a platform uses it to bully and harass their guests. Jimmy's face twisted into an expression of pure fury. Bully, harass, you arrogant piece of work. I have been doing this job for longer than some of your albums have been on the charts. I have interviewed presidents, world leaders, the biggest celebrities on the planet. Don't you dare stand there and lecture me about how to do my job. Then act like you know how to do it. Reba shot back without hesitation. Because what you've done here today isn't comedy. It isn't entertainment. And it certainly isn't professional. What you've done here today is exactly the kind of toxic behavior that gives late-night television a bad name. The accusation that he was damaging the reputation of his own industry was apparently the final straw for Jimmy. He began gesticulating wildly, his voice reaching levels that seemed impossible for human vocal cords. Toxic. Toxic. You want to see toxic, Reba? Toxic is coming on someone else's show and acting like you're doing them a favor. Toxic is treating the host like they're some kind of nuisance you have to endure. Toxic is your whole attitude from the moment you walked in here. Reba's response was delivered with a calm that was somehow more devastating than any shout could have been. Jimmy, I walked in here with the same respect I show every interview, every journalist, every talk show host I work with. The difference is that they treat their guests with the same respect in return. They ask real questions. They listen to the answers. And they don't use their platform as a weapon to settle personal scores. Personal scores? Jimmy was now practically screaming. What personal score could I possibly have with you? I don't even know you. Reba nodded slowly as if Jimmy had just proven his point. Exactly. You don't know me. You don't know my work. You don't know my character. And you don't know what I stand for. But that didn't stop you from attacking me from the moment I sat down. That didn't stop you from making assumptions and hurling accusations. That didn't stop you from turning what should have been a professional interview into a personal vendetta. The other guests sat in stunned silence as the confrontation reached its peak. The band members looked like they might cry. The audience was staring at their hands. Even the producers seemed at a loss for how to handle the situation. Jimmy, realizing that he was losing the battle of public opinion with every word, made one final desperate attempt to justify his behavior. You know what, Reba? Maybe you're right. Maybe I did come at you too hard. But you know why? Because I'm sick of celebrities who think they can coast through interviews without giving anything real. I'm sick of the fake smiles and the rehearsed answers and the pretense that everything is perfect in Nashville. Reba looked at Jimmy for a long moment, and when she finally spoke, her voice carried a sadness that was somehow more powerful than all the anger that had come before. Jimmy, if you wanted something real, all you had to do was ask real questions. If you wanted to know who I am as a person, you could have asked about my passions, my hopes, the things that drive me to keep working, to keep pushing myself, to keep trying to connect with people through my music. Instead, you chose to attack. You chose to belittle. And you chose to turn this into a spectacle. And now, after 40 years of doing interviews, after working with hundreds of journalists and talk show hosts, I can honestly say that this has been the most unpleasant and unprofessional experience of my entire career. With that devastating final statement, Reba McEntire turned and walked away from the stage, leaving Jimmy Fallon sitting alone at his desk, his face a mask of shock and humiliation. The studio remained in stunned silence as one of country music's most respected and beloved artists disappeared through the studio doors, never to return. The confrontation that started as a routine celebrity interview had become something much more significant. A moment that would be analyzed and discussed for years to come, and a stark reminder of what happens when professional courtesy breaks down on live television. The audience gasped. The reaction was immediate and visceral. People were on their feet, not applauding, but staring in disbelief at what they had just witnessed. A murmur rippled through the crowd, a collective sound of shock and outrage. How could this have happened? How could one of the kindest women in country music have been pushed to this point? The answer was sitting right there at the desk, still frozen in his chair, still processing what had just occurred. But here's where this story takes its most shocking turn. Because Reba McEntire walking off would have been dramatic enough. What happened next, however, would go down in television history as one of the most humiliating moments ever broadcast on late-night TV. Jimmy Fallon, sitting alone at his desk, his face a mask of shock and barely concealed fury, suddenly snapped. He looked around the studio, at the stunned audience, at his band members who were desperately trying to figure out what to do, at the producers frantically gesturing from behind the cameras. And something inside him broke. How dare she? Jimmy muttered under his breath. How dare she make me look like the villain? The producers tried to calm the situation. Jimmy, let's just take a commercial break and regroup. But Jimmy wasn't listening. He was staring at the empty chair where Reba had been sitting, his eyes blazing with a rage that had been building for years. You know what? Jimmy said, his voice rising. I've been doing this show for decades. I've interviewed the biggest names in entertainment. And I have never, and I mean never, been treated with such disrespect by a guest. The audience, still stunned, began to murmur. Some people sat back down, sensing that the drama wasn't over. Others remained on their feet, unsure whether to applaud or to watch in stunned silence. Jimmy continued, his voice now shaking with emotion. She walks in here with her big hair and her big voice and her "I'm just a country girl" routine, and everyone just falls over themselves to worship her. Meanwhile, I'm the one asking the real questions. I'm the one who's not afraid to challenge the narrative. And what do I get? I get called a bully. I get accused of being unprofessional. I get treated like I'm the villain of this story. The producers tried again. Jimmy, I really think we should take a break. No, Jimmy snapped. I'm not taking a break. I'm done taking breaks. I'm done being the one who has to apologize for doing my job. If Reba McEntire can't handle a few tough questions, then maybe she shouldn't come on shows like this. Maybe she should stay in her little bubble where everyone tells her how wonderful she is. But here's the thing. Her bubble is built on a lie. She's not the legend everyone thinks she is. She's a brand. She's a product. She's a carefully constructed image designed to sell albums and concert tickets. And I'm tired of pretending otherwise. The audience went quiet. Not the respectful quiet from before. This was the quiet of people who had just witnessed someone dig their own grave on live television. Jimmy seemed to sense the shift, but instead of backing down, he doubled down. You want to know the truth? He said, gesturing wildly at the empty chair. The truth is, Reba McEntire has been playing the same character for 40 years. The same country girl, same big voice, same "I'm just like you" persona. And people eat it up because it makes them feel like she's authentic. But it's not authentic. It's a performance. It's a carefully constructed image designed to make her seem approachable and down to earth. But the world has changed. And people like her, people who refuse to evolve, they're the ones holding us back. She's not a legend. She's a caricature. She's a brand. She's a product. And I'm tired of pretending otherwise. The studio was now completely silent. Even the crew behind the cameras had stopped moving. The producers were staring at Jimmy with expressions that could only be described as horrified disbelief. The band members looked like they were about to cry. The audience had their heads in their hands. And Jimmy, finally realizing that he had just said all of this on live television, seemed to freeze. The realization hit him like a freight train. He had just spent the last 5 minutes attacking one of the most beloved figures in country music history. He had called her a caricature, accused her of being disingenuous, dismissed her entire career as a performance. And the audience, the same audience that had been watching in stunned silence just moments earlier, was now staring at him with expressions ranging from pity to disgust. Jimmy opened his mouth, perhaps to try to walk it back, perhaps to double down even further. But before he could say another word, something happened that no one in the studio expected. From the wings, a voice called out. It was soft, gentle, and unmistakably Southern. "That's enough, Jimmy." Everyone turned. Reba McEntire had come back. She was standing just off stage, her microphone still in her hand, her expression calm but unreadable. "I was going to leave," Reba said quietly. "But I couldn't help overhearing what you were saying about me. And I thought to myself, Reba, if you walk away now, he's going to keep talking. He's going to keep spreading this poison. So I came back to say one thing." She walked slowly back onto the stage, her presence commanding immediate attention. The audience parted to let her through. Jimmy sat frozen in his chair, his face a mask of terror and humiliation. "You can say whatever you want about my music," Reba continued, her voice still calm but carrying a weight that made everyone in the room lean forward. "You can say whatever you want about my hair, my voice, my image. That's your right. But don't you ever, and I mean ever, stand on a stage and dismiss the work of hundreds of talented people who dedicated their lives to making that music." Reba paused, letting the words sink in. "I spent my whole life being told I wasn't good enough," she continued. "I was told I was too country, too loud, too everything. And you know what I did? I kept going. I kept singing. I kept believing that if I could make just one person feel a little less alone, then it was all worth it." She looked directly at Jimmy. "You sit here in your fancy studio with your fancy desk and your fancy opinions, and you think you know what's best for everyone. But you don't know what it's like to be a little girl in Oklahoma who had nothing but a dream and a song. You don't know what it's like to work your whole life to build something meaningful, only to have someone tear it down because it doesn't fit their narrow view of what a successful career should look like. So let me be very clear, Jimmy. I don't need your approval. I never did. And I never will." Jimmy's face was now a blotchy red mess. His eyes were glistening with tears of rage and humiliation. He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Reba continued, her voice now carrying an edge that no one had ever heard from her before. "You talked about accountability earlier. Well, here's some accountability for you. You've spent years making jokes at other people's expense on this show. You've made a career out of tearing others down to make yourself feel bigger. And the saddest part is, I don't think you even realize how small it makes you look." The studio was deathly quiet. You could hear a pin drop. Reba took a step closer to Jimmy. "I want you to look around this room, Jimmy. Look at your band. Look at the audience. Look at the crew. And ask yourself, who was really the bully here today?" Jimmy opened his mouth, but Reba held up a hand. "No. I'm not asking you to answer. I'm asking you to think about it. Because the way you treated me today, the way you've treated so many guests over the years, that's not comedy. That's not tough love. That's just cruelty. And cruelty has no place in civilized conversation." Reba turned to face the audience. "I'm sorry you had to witness this," she said. "But I'm not sorry I said what I said. Someone needed to say it. And sometimes, the people who seem the sweetest are the ones who've had to learn how to be strong." She turned back to Jimmy. "I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, Jimmy. I truly do. But I won't be a part of it." She looked directly into the camera one last time. "To everyone watching at home, I want you to know something. I came here today to promote an album that I'm proud of. An album that means something to me. And instead, I got lectured about my authenticity by someone who apparently thinks his job is to tear down anyone who doesn't fit his narrow view of what an entertainer should be." She paused, letting the words land. If you're watching at home and you've ever felt like the media doesn't represent you fairly, like they're more interested in creating drama than actually listening to what you have to say, then you just watched it happen in real time. I've been doing this for 40 years. I've worked with some of the best in the business. And I can honestly say, this is the first time I've ever been treated this way. And it will be the last. With that, Reba McEntire turned and walked off the stage for the final time. The audience erupted. This time, the applause was deafening. People were on their feet, cheering, whistling, crying. It was the kind of moment that happens once in a generation. The kind of moment that gets replayed for years. And Jimmy Fallon, sitting alone at his desk, his face a mask of utter devastation, seemed to realize that he had just lost the battle, the war, and his reputation all in one evening. The producers tried to salvage the show. "Well," they said, their voices trembling. "That was certainly unexpected." But Jimmy wasn't done. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I can't do this," he said, his voice cracking. "I just can't." Without another word, he ripped off his microphone and threw it onto the desk. Then he turned and walked off the stage, leaving behind a studio full of stunned faces and an audience that had just witnessed one of the most humiliating moments in television history. The cameras kept rolling for a few more seconds, capturing the uncomfortable silence, the audience still standing, the band members exchanging helpless glances. Then, finally, the floor manager's voice cut through the chaos. "Cut to commercial. Cut to commercial now." What did you think was the most shocking moment from this incredible confrontation? The way Reba McEntire maintained her dignity while exposing Jimmy Fallon's behavior was absolutely masterful. And the way Jimmy Fallon completely lost his composure after being so thoroughly outclassed was nothing short of poetic justice. If you believe dignity is strength, if you believe standing up for yourself matters, and if you think moments like this deserve to be remembered, tap like to show your support. Subscribe to The Clash for more stories where power shifts on live television. And tell us in the comments, did Reba do the right thing by coming back to deliver that final message, or should she have just walked away and let Jimmy dig his own grave? We want to hear your thoughts. Drop your comments below, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss another explosive moment from the world of entertainment. This is the kind of television that reminds us why we watch, why we care, and why sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to stay silent. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.